Hi guys, today we'll delve into the case of a girl who went to the laundromat near her home to do her laundry. But she never made it back home and her mother reported her missing. Detectives found some disturbing clues and spoke to witnesses who shared chilling stories. But despite all this, the case remained unsolved for decades. It wasn't until 51 years later that investigators finally uncovered the truth. Debbie Lynn Randall was born on August 21, 1962, in Marietta, Georgia. She grew up in a loving family with two older brothers. Sometime after Debbie's birth, her parents divorced, but her dad remained involved in their lives. A few years later, their mom married a man named Roy, and he became Debbie's stepfather. They all lived in a small apartment building in a quiet neighborhood near a military base. Debbie was a typical, cheerful kid who loved hanging out with friends and playing basketball. She also loved dolls. Debbie had a large collection and spent a lot of time playing with them. On January 13, 1972, when Debbie was 9 years old, she had dinner with her family. After that, her mom decided to send her to the laundromat, as she had done many times before. Debbie was supposed to keep an eye on the laundry while it washed, while someone else from the family would help her carry the clothes to the laundromat and back home. The laundromat was just a few hundred yards away from their home, right across the street, so her mom wasn't too worried about anything happening to her. Back then, it was quite common for parents to have their kids help with chores like laundry, and Debbie even made some friends with the other girls at the laundromat. On that day, her mom wanted to send Debbie's older brother along, but he wasn't feeling well and wanted to watch his favorite TV show. So, the mother asked her husband to take the laundry instead, and Debbie went along with him, grabbing a box of detergent on the way. Her stepdad dropped off the laundry, loaded it into 2 washing machines, and left, while Debbie stayed to wait for the wash to finish. After that, she was supposed to walk home and ask someone to pick up the clean clothes as she couldn't carry them all by herself. Sometime later, Debbie's mom noticed that she still hadn't returned, even though the laundry should have been done by then. It was getting dark outside, so she and her husband decided to walk to the laundromat, but Debbie wasn't there. The employee told them that she had left a while ago and hadn't come back since. Her mom became worried and started to walk around the nearby streets with Roy, searching for Debbie. Soon they noticed something strange. A few dozen yards from the laundromat, in the parking lot next to one of the cars, there was spilled detergent. Since Debbie was carrying the box of detergent, her mom immediately thought it might have belonged to her. They continued to search the parking lot and the surrounding area, but there were no other signs of Debbie. Some neighbors who knew the family well also joined in to help with the search, but all their efforts yielded no results, and Debbie's mom decided to contact the police. The officers examined the area of the parking lot where the detergent was spilled and noticed their first potential lead. The detergent was scattered just inches away from a parked car, and on its door, they spotted several clear fingerprints. Those prints appeared fresh and were located significantly lower than the handle, which already seemed odd. The officers thought that at this exact spot, an unknown perpetrator might have grabbed the girl and touched the car in the process. They collected these prints and handed them over to forensic experts while also beginning to search for the owner of the vehicle to confirm if the prints didn't belong to them. With no other leads, the police started combing the streets, trying to find new clues or witnesses. The laundromat employee mentioned that she hadn't noticed anything suspicious. Debbie had been sitting and waiting for the laundry to finish, then took her box of detergent and left the building. Most likely, she headed home to ask someone to pick up the clothes. The police soon found the first witness whose account immediately changed the course of the investigation. 12-year-old Sandra, along with her friend, was walking to the same laundromat, helping her carry dirty clothes. Suddenly, they saw a man grabbing a girl in the middle of the street and pulling her into his car, parked nearby the laundromat. The girl was screaming and trying to break free, but he slammed the door shut, got behind the wheel, and drove off. The man nearly hit Sandra and her friend. One of the girls started shouting after him, but he sped away. At the time, Sandra didn't realize she had witnessed an abduction. She thought the man was the girl's father or some other relative picking her up while she wanted to stay out longer. Because of this, Sandra didn't tell any adults about what happened or report it to the police. Now, when she learned about Debbie's abduction, she provided investigators with crucial information. Based on her description, The perpetrator drove a dark pickup truck, likely a 1957 model, according to her description. She described the man as young, white, with thick, dark hair. He wore a white t-shirt, jeans, and black work boots. Another girl who lived in the same building as Debbie also shared her observations. That evening, she was standing outside her apartment when a dark pickup truck drove past the building. At first, she thought it was her uncle behind the wheel. But when the driver stopped right in front of her and looked at the girl, she realized it wasn't him. According to her description, it was a white man with medium-length dark hair. She also provided investigators with a few more details about his appearance that she could remember. The girl mentioned that this man parked near their building, next to the same car where the spilled detergent would later be found. The police soon found another witness. A man who lived near Debbie's house was driving to the hospital to visit his wife. At one point, a dark pickup truck, likely a Dodge, nearly crashed into him before driving off recklessly. The driver appeared to be around 30 years old with dark hair. However, the most crucial detail was that the witness also saw a girl in his car, seemingly attempting to escape while the driver held her with one hand. After listening to all these accounts, the police had no doubt that Debbie had been abducted. They distributed information about the suspect's vehicle to all patrol units, and police artists created a sketch based on the testimonies of the three witnesses. While some officers were searching for similar vehicles and checking their owners, others organized extensive searches for Debbie. With each day, more volunteers and police officers from other towns joined in. In total, around 4,000 people were involved in the search, setting a record not only for the city but for the entire state. Detectives also investigated various people who knew Debbie, including all male neighbors, her stepfather, and her biological father, but all of them were ruled out as suspects. Her father, who lived in the same city, learned about his daughter's disappearance at work and immediately joined the search efforts. Detectives checked previously convicted criminals living within a few-mile radius of Debbie's home, but they didn't find any suitable suspects among them. The extensive search efforts continued for over 2 weeks without yielding any results. This went on until January 29th, when several students joined the search teams and were sent to explore the wooded area several miles from Debbie's house. After spending nearly 5 hours there, one of them suddenly noticed tracks on the ground leading from the trail into the depths of the forest, as if something had been dragged there. Following the tracks deeper into the woods for about 150 feet, they stumbled upon a human body and immediately called the officers. They quickly realized that they had found Debbie Randall. She was wearing the same clothes described by her mother on the day of her abduction, a lavender dress and a dark blue zip-up jacket with a hood. However, her shoes were missing. She had socks on, but her lavender shoes were nowhere to be found. She had received these shoes as a Christmas gift just a few weeks before her disappearance, and she loved them very much. Her body was handed over to medical experts who determined that she had died from strangulation. The victim had also been sexually assaulted. Experts found a single dark hair on her body, most likely belonging to the killer. Since DNA analysis was not used at that time, experts couldn't do much with this evidence. They examined it under a microscope and, based on their knowledge at the time, concluded that it belonged to a man aged between 18 and 30 years old. Debbie's clothing was also covered in dirt, and lacking other leads, detectives decided to examine it more thoroughly. They contacted a geologist and asked him to work with their forensic team. Together, they determined that some of the dirt consisted of a particular type of clay mined less than 10 miles from their city. The geologist confirmed that it was indeed the unique northern Georgia clay that couldn't be found anywhere else nearby. There were also other dirt stains, different from the first. They were traced back to another type of clay mined by a local company just 2 miles from where the body was discovered. Based on this information, detectives theorized that the perpetrator didn't kill the victim immediately. Instead, he drove her to remote areas where those types of clay were located. Most likely, he initially took her out of town, where he sexually assaulted her. Then he drove to the location where the second type of clay was mined, killed her, and took her to the forest, dragging her body behind the trees and leaving it there. Supporting this theory were not only the clay traces, but also the forensic analysis indicating that Debbie was already dead when brought to the forest. If the perpetrator had killed her there would have been signs of a struggle around that area. The traces on the ground from the trail into the trees also suggested that the victim was already dead. The clay mining sites were quite remote and difficult to access, leading detectives to speculate that the killer might have worked there. They reached out to the mining companies, and a supervisor for one of them confirmed this theory. It was hard to believe that someone unfamiliar with that area could have taken the abducted girl there. Even the workers themselves sometimes struggled to navigate through these vast areas. Police checked employees from both companies, trying to find a man matching the description or the similar vehicle, but it didn't lead to anything. They also had fingerprints left on the car just inches away from the abduction site and compared them with all suspects, but this yielded no results either. The news of Debbie's brutal murder shook the entire city, and thousands of people came to bid farewell at her funeral. The local police department continued their efforts to find the killer and bring them to justice, but they couldn't find any new leads, hitting dead ends over and over again. Eventually, the case remained unsolved for many years. Detectives continued to work on it, checking dozens of suspects, but they couldn't establish their involvement. For the lead detective on the case, Morris Nix, Debbie's murder remained a priority throughout his entire career. The crime happened when he was just 19, and he had been involved in the search and investigation from day one. For many years, Nix pursued various leads, scrutinized different suspects, and eventually compiled a list of 4 men whom he considered the most likely suspects. When the FBI established a DNA database, experts were able to extract the genetic profile of the perpetrator from the hair found on Debbie's body. It was entered into the database, but no matches were found. This indicated that the killer either had never been convicted of other serious crimes, or it occurred before the time when DNA samples started being collected from such individuals. In 2015, 43 years after the murder, the case was reopened and detectives decided to re-examine the victim's clothing using modern technology. It had been stored in the evidence warehouse all this time, and experts found biological material from an unknown man on it. However, over the years, it had degraded significantly, resulting in a partial profile. In 2018, Debbie's mother, who had hoped for decades to see the police arrest her daughter's killer and hold him accountable, gave an interview. She said that after Debbie's murder, she couldn't bear to live in the apartment where everything reminded her of her loss. She moved to another city, and year after year, the lack of progress in the investigation slowly destroyed her. She also said her only desire now is to see the closure of this case before her time comes. Unfortunately, that was not meant to happen. Just a few weeks after the interview, she passed away to cancer at the age of 78, and she was laid to rest next to her daughter. Sandra, who witnessed the abduction at the age of 12, also spoke out in an interview. She said that she had never stopped blaming herself over the years. According to Sandra, she believed she could have stopped the perpetrator and prevented the abduction, even if it meant taking Debbie's place and dying instead of her. In 2019, the local police department received additional funding, enabling them to request a more detailed analysis of Debbie's clothing. This time, experts were able to extract a full DNA sample from it, but the perpetrator's DNA still wasn't in the FBI database. Debbie's father was also interviewed, and he shared that not a day had gone by over the decades when he didn't think about Debbie. He still kept a box of her old photos, hoping for only one thing: to reunite with his daughter in heaven. In 2022, shortly after the interview, he passed away. In the same year, detectives focused all their efforts on the one lead they had, DNA. They reached out to a company in Florida specializing in an innovative DNA analysis method called genetic genealogy. The police handed over all the biological samples they had collected over the years and waited. Experts created a profile of the unknown man and began searching for his relatives in public genetic databases. They needed to find people who had uploaded their DNA, because family members' genetic material has similarities. Modern tools can detect even distant relatives. After examining thousands of potential relatives of the killer, investigators narrowed down their search to a family living in Marietta in 2023. They asked them to provide DNA samples, and they agreed. The analysis showed that the killer was indeed their close relative, so experts looked into their family more carefully. They soon identified the most likely owner of the killer's DNA sample, a man named William Rose. However, there was a problem. Rose had taken his own life in 1974, just 2 years after Debbie's murder. But detectives were determined to finally close this case, no matter what. They obtained a warrant to exhume his grave, and experts took a direct DNA sample from his remains. After 51 years since Debbie's murder, the police finally got a full match. William Rose was indeed the killer. At the time of the murder, he was only 24 years old and had never been a suspect. It turned out that his relatives lived in the same building as Debbie's family. Rose regularly visited them, so investigators believe that he might have seen the girl on multiple occasions. Perhaps that evening he was headed to visit his relatives, but saw Debbie coming out of the laundromat and heading towards her home. Based on the testimonies of her neighbors and other witnesses, Rose pulled into the parking lot between the victim's house and the laundromat, left the engine running, got out, grabbed Debbie, and then drove north. Perhaps he immediately headed to the clay quarry, which was located in that direction. It's worth mentioning that Rose didn't have any other criminal record. Either he didn't commit anything serious besides Debbie's murder, or he simply didn't get caught. At the time the case was solved, the only living close relative of the victim was her older brother, Melvin. He attended the press conference where they announced the discovery of the culprit and thanked everyone who had worked on his sister's case for over half a century. He also said he wished his mom could have lived to see this moment, but added that she was now in heaven with Debbie.